Mark Allen, 2007. Part 2 and Part 3. Part 2 The individual long turn. Part 3 Two-way discussion. Topic 21 to 30.
Topic 21. An important letter. Cue card. Describe an important letter that you received. You should say who wrote it, when you received it, what the letter was about, and explain why it was important.
A very important letter that I received actually came from my doctor, believe it or not. I know that sounds a little strange coming from a young person like me. You see, at the time I was in school and was working very hard and neglecting to take care of myself. I was so worried and stressed over my studies that, well, number one, I wasn't eating very well. Then, on top of that, I was spending so much time in the library that I wasn't going outside and getting any exercise. I noticed that I was starting to get sick easily and kind of run down. It was really getting bad. Even my friends noticed my lack of strength and energy, and one of them was so concerned about me that he wrote and mentioned this to my parents, and my mum asked one of her friends, who is a doctor, to give me some advice. Well, this doctor, who I didn't even know, wrote me a long letter and told me flat out that I really needed to have more balance in my life and make sure that I was getting all of the things that I already said I was missing. So, out to the badminton court I went, whether I felt like it or not, eating a good healthy breakfast in the morning, slowing down and taking some time with my friends, and then, before I knew it, I felt so much better. If this doctor hadn't taken the time to write me, I just don't know what would have happened to me. I think my life would be different, and I might not even be sitting here talking with you.
Part 3. Letters. 1. What are the different kinds of letters that the post office delivers?
Well, there are bills and things that you have to pay. Then there is a lot of junk mail and advertisements. The nice thing is when you get a personal letter from one of your friends. I suppose there would be some credit card applications and maybe a bank statement. Birthday cards and Christmas cards come through the mail too.
2. What can people do if they receive unwanted advertising in the mail?
The best thing that they could do is simply drop it in the wastebasket. I suppose if they wanted to, they could save them and tie them together and take them to the recycling centre to make a little money. They could just put them in a corner and let them stack up and see if their friends are interested in them. If they have a pet, they could use advertisements to line the inside of a birdcage or litter box so it could do its business there.
3. Why do people write letters to newspapers?
I think it is because people read newspapers and maybe something that they read affects them and they have something to say about it. Of course, not everyone does this because some people are quieter in nature and would feel like writing and having it printed would be embarrassing. I really think that it depends on the nature of the person and what affects them. I don't know if I would do something like that unless an article really got to me.
4. Do you think it is better to apply for a job by letter or by email? Why? Why not?
Well, it really depends on the company, but a lot of companies do their business by email, and so they might prefer that. If the company wanted a hard copy letter, well, of course I would oblige them. I think because I am applying for the job, I would do whatever is convenient for the company.
5. What do you think is the most difficult kind of letter to write?
I find it very difficult to write a letter rejecting someone. It's hard to tell them you don't want to date or whatever them and not hurt their feelings any more than you have to. You have to word things carefully and make sure they get the point, but be subtle.
Emails. 6. What are the advantages and disadvantages of emails compared to handwritten letters?
Well, of course, an obvious advantage is speed, getting it there quickly. Another advantage would be you don't need a paper, which would save on the environment, along with not needing a pen, which again saves the environment. As to the disadvantages, well, a handwritten letter has a more personal touch. It shows that you took your time to sit down and gather all of the writing materials and also took time to go to the post office or put it in the mailbox to get it to the person on the other end.
7. Do you prefer to write letters or emails? Why?
I really only write emails now. I haven't written a letter in so long, it is kind of hard to remember when. As long as I have a computer and the net is there, I will always prefer writing emails. Things are just moving too quickly for me to take the time and energy to write a letter. In a way, I would have to change my whole way of thinking to write a letter. It might be fun to try it and see what it is like.
8. Do senior citizens in China write emails? Why? Why not?
Well, unless they are very unusual senior citizens, they don't write emails. You know that having a computer, and more important, knowing how to operate one, is just not something that the older generation has a lot of experience in. In our culture, and maybe even in the West, I don't know, senior citizens like to get around in their own neighborhoods and mix and mingle with their friends there. So the need to write emails and use a computer is not really there. I suppose that if an older person has a business, then they might write some emails, but more than likely they would have a secretary do it for them.
9. What effects, if any, do you think the use of emails might have on traditional Chinese culture?
Well, as I was saying, emails have had a big effect on Chinese culture already. We younger people want to reach out to not just the ones that are in our neighborhood or even in our city, but to those that are all over the world. You know, for a long time China was closed to the West and Western culture. Now that it has opened its doors, there have been many changes, and writing emails is one of them. Emailing is more than just writing. It really is a way of life, and this way of life wasn't available here in China before.
10. Do you think handwriting will still be an important skill in the future?
Well, in China right now, the written characters are important for many things, such as billboards and small business signs. But now that computers are being made with Chinese character inputs, the actual writing out of them is no longer necessary. I think there will come a time in the future when writing the characters by hand will be a lost art. Sad to say, as writing characters by hand is an art form here in China. Computerization is moving in and taking over, so, for the sake of speed, we will see the slower methods of communicating, such as handwritten characters, become a lost art and a casualty of modern times. Topic 22. Books. Cue card. Describe a book that you enjoyed reading. You should say what the title is, what it is about, why you read it, and explain what effect the book had on you.
I am fond of reading selected works of Jack London. It is a collection of the writer's works, including 3 novels and 40 short stories. It is mostly about different characters in the Klondike region of Alaska during the gold rush, but also tells about people's struggles in different situations. I was given the book as a present, and I was immediately fascinated by the raw, beautiful, but very real world the writer experienced and wrote about. One story in particular, The Sea Wolf, is about a man who was born into a comfortable life and is suddenly thrust into a dangerous, harsh, and pitiless environment aboard a seal hunting ship under a cruel, despotic, yet charismatic and intriguing captain. He is faced with a moral dilemma, whether he should fight to survive without regard for others, or hold on to values he grew up with in easy circumstances, such as altruism and self-sacrifice. In the end, he finds strength to stand against the merciless captain. When I first read the book, I was most impressed with the exciting action and imagery in the stories. But as I grew older and read them again, the most striking features to me were instead the deeper qualities of character hard to find and to define. It caused me to look further into people, both in books and in real life, for the qualities that made them truly interesting and enduring.
Part 3. Reading in China. 1. Do Chinese people like to read?
Like most countries, it depends on individual preference. But I would say it is not so popular an activity as in countries where the pace of life is slower. Most readers in China are students who have to read technical subjects, but reading is becoming more common, especially among the young. I imagine that as books find a wider audience, reading will become more common.
2. Do young and old people like to read the same books?
No, the interests of young and old vary greatly. Young people mostly like fantasy and fiction best. Older people often prefer serious or historical works.
3. What kinds of books are most popular in China?
I think martial arts stories are favorites. Some Chinese classics are famous and widely read as well. Of course, knowing what is the favorite of many people is difficult.
4. Compare reading habits today to those of the past.
Today, education is widely available, so many people can read. Also, these days, printing is faster than it once was, so many books of different kinds can be printed. In the past, fewer people could read, and there were fewer books, so people enjoyed and appreciated reading more. Modern inventions have also made more time for reading.
5. How do you think reading habits will change in the future?
I'm not sure. Maybe reading will become more widespread. Maybe it will become less common as new technology, such as virtual reality, becomes more readily available. Of course, people who like to read simply because they can get along with their thoughts will continue to read.
Children and reading. 6. Do you think it's a good idea to teach children to read when they are very young?
Yes, they can learn more. Also, they may be able to enjoy a new pastime. Many children, instead of playing games which develop social skills or doing things which promote good values, such as reading good books, play computer games and watch TV, which often causes antisocial behavior.
7. What do children like to read?
Children especially enjoy reading stories. They also like reading books about nature. If a book has pictures, children will really enjoy it. Many children like reading stories with silly themes, often because they were never given anything else. If parents or teachers introduce their children to a wider variety of choices, children will enjoy a broader range of books.
8. Do parents read stories to their children in China?
Some do and some do not. My parents read to me when I was a child. They were teachers. Some of my friends' parents did not read to them. In poor families, the parents may not be able to read at all. Of course, with their parents being so busy, to even have the time to read is a real challenge in this day and age.
9. How do you think these stories influence children?
Children are very much affected by the stories their parents read to them. These stories are sometimes the first education a child receives. I can remember many of the stories my parents first read to me. Values found in children's books will often affect the young readers. Because their parents are reading the stories, the children will listen more.
10. Why do you think people sometimes idealize characters in stories?
People need to have heroes they can look up to and learn from. Role models are very important in life, as many teachers can tell us. Children often imitate what their heroes or older people do. Idealistic characters in stories have a great effect on individuals. Even whole societies have changed to imitate a famous character in a story.
Topic 23. Furniture. Cue card. Describe an item of furniture that you use often. You should say what it is, where it is, what it looks like, and explain how or why you use it.
A piece of furniture I use often is a small folding chair. It's made of green canvas, and because it is a folding chair, I can easily put it away and out of sight when I'm not using it. It's convenient for me because my room is small and I don't have space for a lot of furniture. I also don't like clutter, so by putting the chair away after I use it, my room looks a little tidier. My bedroom is the only one place in the house that I have to myself, so I spend a lot of time there either studying or working. I'm in my last year of university, so I have many writing assignments and individual research to do. I do most of my writing on my laptop, so it's convenient and comfortable to sit in my chair with my computer on my lap, either typing or reading or both. As I said, the chair is made of canvas, and of course the frame is aluminium, so it's lightweight and easy to put away and take out whenever I need it. Surprisingly, it is very comfortable for a folding chair, and that was the most important factor for me when I chose it. It was also inexpensive. It's not a very beautiful piece of furniture, but it has definitely been one of the most practical things I've bought in a long time.
Part 3. Buying furniture. 1. When, in what situations, do people in China buy furniture?
Most people buy furniture at a few main points in their lives. Naturally, when people are getting married is one of those times. Another time is when they buy a new flat.
2. How do people decide what furniture to buy for the home or office? What factors do they consider?
Well, they will consider what kind of furniture is needed. They will also look at which room it will go in and how much space they have. The women especially will think about colour and style, and what design looks best to them. I'd say price is probably the deciding point. They might like something very much, but if it's too expensive, they won't be able to buy it.
3. In Chinese families, who usually decides what furniture to buy for the home?
I think it varies from family to family. Nowadays, couples are making more decisions together. In my family, my parents even ask me what I think or like. In the past, often the men made decisions that concerned money, but some of those things are changing now.
4. Do people in China prefer traditional or modern styles of furniture?
That also depends on the people and the families. I don't think there is any set preference. From my experience, though, I would say many younger couples prefer modern furniture. I think it goes along with other trends in our country. What I mean is that modern or foreign fashions are often more popular and interesting, especially for young people. Maybe I'm different in this way, though, because I think many pieces of traditional furniture in our country are very beautiful. They are also often made better than the modern things.
5. Have there been any recent changes in the kinds of furniture that people in China use?
Well, as I said, a lot of foreign influence has come into China, and this is affecting what people buy, including furniture. A very popular furniture store right now in China is IKEA. This is a store from Sweden, and its style of furniture is a big change from the recent and distant past. I think that if people have the money, they may return to the quality furniture from years gone by. Overall, though, the predominant style of furniture that people in China use is modern.
Furniture design. 6. What factors should a furniture designer consider when designing a piece of furniture?
The use of the particular piece would be the first consideration. A designer would also have to think of the market he is targeting. This would usually indicate the cost of the finished product. This in turn will influence what materials he can use within that price range.
7. What are the qualities of a good furniture designer?
I'd say he needs to be artistic and imaginative. At the same time, a designer also has to have quite a bit of practical sense. It's generally no use to design something that is beautiful but impossible to construct. Or maybe the designer can figure out how to build it, but it ends up so expensive that no one can afford it. In any design field, there are people who design something more for art's sake. They don't really expect anyone to buy it, or they hope to find a collector to buy it as a piece of art, more than as something useful.
Housing. 8. What kinds of housing are there in China?
There are many kinds of housing, just as in other countries. There are flats and houses and also villas, but of course most people can't afford anything other than flats. That is at least the case in the cities. In the rural areas, there are many people who live in houses, but these are usually very simple houses, and these people are usually farmers.
9. How do people decide on the kind of housing they choose to live in?
In reality, I don't think most people have a lot of choices, unless they are very rich, and these people are few in number compared to the general population. Most decide on flats because that is all they can afford. Usually, people will try to choose something as close to their workplace as possible. Unfortunately, even in that, there is not much choice, and many people still have to spend a lot of time traveling to and from work.
10. For most Chinese people, what is an ideal house?
I think if most Chinese people could choose any house they wanted, they would choose a private individual house rather than a flat. They'd also want something with a garden where they could have flowers and trees and even grow some vegetables. They would also want something big enough that they could have members of their family live with them, or at least a place they could stay if they came for a visit.
11. How has housing changed in China?
Nowadays, people live in flats, and often these are in tall buildings if in big cities. In the past, most lived in houses, even if they were small. Some cities had courtyard houses where many family members lived together, and there was a garden in the middle where they could enjoy the outdoors together. You've probably heard of these. They are interesting to foreigners.
12. How will housing change in the future?
I can imagine there will be more flats in the big cities that will be in taller buildings and with more modern facilities and equipment built into them. I hope, though, that some designers will do something to see that there are more park areas in between the buildings. I think city planners are making a big mistake by cramming in so much concrete. More green areas would be an important change to make in the future. Topic 24. Advertisements. Cue card. Describe an unforgettable advertisement that you saw or heard. You should say where you saw or heard it, what kind of advertisement it was, what the contents of the advertisement were, and explain why this advertisement is so unforgettable. While waiting for my boyfriend to pick me up from work, I was watching advertisements on the TV in the lobby. That night, I saw an advertisement that has forever stuck in my mind. It was a commercial for Nike shoes with Michael Jordan. In it, he said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot, but missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." I couldn't get that commercial out of my mind, not because I thought buying Nike shoes would make me as successful as Michael Jordan, but because of his unflinching determination and perseverance. Life is full of challenges and difficulties that test our level of commitment. I believe having determination divides the winners from the losers. Successful people are not ones who have never failed, but those who kept trying. As simple as this may sound, it is the one ingredient that separates the winners from the losers. The one skill that winners acquire is an understanding that growth is only possible if you have the courage to change what you have been doing, if it is not achieving the result you desire. Sometimes success is learning how to fall, and recognizing that from that fall you will learn to grow. And growth is what a fulfilling life is all about.
Part 3. The influence of advertisements. 1. How do advertisements attract attention?
It all depends on what group of people the advertisement is aimed for. Young people look if it's cool, hip, or fashionable, whereas older people tend to be more practical-minded. So those in charge of advertising need to have a clear idea of who they will be targeting with their advertisement and plan accordingly. If the advertisement is geared to the younger generation, then showing how the product can help kids be more attractive, confident, or successful is good. Catchy music also helps attract attention and helps listeners remember it. If you're trying to reach the older generation with your advertisement, explaining how the product will give them better health or help them relax or be happier may appeal to them.
2. Do young and old people have the same attitudes towards advertisements?
Definitely not. Every individual has his own unique attitude toward advertisements and the advantages and disadvantages that advertising brings. Both old and young people are inclined to believe and think that advertisements tend to be misleading, dishonest, phony, shallow, and at times annoying, especially when they're not well made or dorky. On the other hand, if done well, they can be very creative, humorous, artistic, and enjoyable to watch. Those, however, are the exception, rather than the norm.
3. Do you think advertisements are a good or bad influence on children?
Looking at today's children, I would have to say advertisements have predominantly had a negative influence on their lives and character. Ads create a discontentment with what children have and a desire to own more and to be like everyone else. Advertisements usually tend to be unrealistic and give a false impression of how the children should be or what will happen when they buy the product.
4. Do you think advertisements actually influence people to buy things, and how?
When seen a lot, advertisements make products more familiar and ingrained in people's mind. So when they want to buy something, they will take a brand that they recognize. In China, people want to be like the West, and so they buy what they see on TV that the Western people have. They think that if they have this Western product, they will be as cool as this person, which is totally bizarre to my mind.
Government control. 5. Does the Chinese government control advertisements in any way?
Of course. All TV media is controlled in some way by the government, so advertisements must be as well. The government prevents advertisements from having inappropriate content or content that is not in line with government policy. That is common in every country. I'm sure that if the advertisement is within normal bounds, then the government wouldn't have much to say about it.
6. Do you think there should be controls on advertising?
Yes, I do. Some things should not be advertised, such as cigarettes, which are harmful to people's health. Most people are aware of their existence, so they don't need to be promoted more. Children especially should not be shown advertisements that make harmful things look cool or interesting. Advertisements that have age-inappropriate content should also be banned.
7. Do you think that advertisements for products that harm the health, such as cigarettes, should be allowed?
Now you are getting into freedom of choice and whether it would be better to just prohibit something from being advertised to get people to stop using the product. But unfortunately, this just doesn't work, as prohibition in the States found out. The best thing would be for the products just to not be manufactured, But this doesn't work either, because then they would be produced illegally, becoming more dangerous.
8. Can you think of any example of false advertising?
The biggest example that comes to my mind is McDonald's advertisements. Every time I go to McDonald's, I see pictures of happy, thin people with big smiles and perfect teeth holding hamburgers and cartons of French fries that are at least 3 times bigger than the real products. This advertisement clearly ignores 3 glaring facts. For one, if you eat at McDonald's a lot, you will not look like the people in the advertisement. 2. The hamburger and French fries are nowhere near the size pictured. 3. If you stand smiling holding a burger, nobody will think you are cool.
9. What kinds of products are most often, most easily, promoted by false advertising?
Well, most products are really promoted by false advertising. I hate to sound so cynical, but I have a friend in the advertising business, and a lot of so-called experts advertising their product know absolutely nothing about it. In the field of beauty care products, this happens a lot. The poor women sitting at home with nothing to do except watch TV are so susceptible to this kind of advertising.
Topic 25. A childhood present. Cue card. Describe a present you received when you were a child. You should say what the present was, who gave it to you, how the present was used, and explain how you felt when you got this present.
The most memorable gift I received was when I was 7 years old. On my birthday, my parents bought me a bike. They painted it pink for me to match the pink tassels that were hanging off the handlebars. I learned to ride my bike in the park near our house, and after I learned how to ride, I would often ride around in the park while my brother and sister were playing. When my younger brother got his own bike, we would ride along the street together. When I first saw the bicycle, I was very excited, and I thought it was very pretty. I was so happy to get it that my father took me out to learn to ride it the same day. After I learned to ride it, I enjoyed it so much that I would ride it whenever I could. I didn't mind having to play by myself if I could ride my bike. I loved the feeling of the wind on my face and through my hair, and seeing the ground speed under my wheels. It was so refreshing when I was hot and sweaty to have the cool breeze blowing all the time. Part 3. Giving gifts in China. 1. Do Chinese people often give gifts?
Yes, we do. Not as much as Western cultures, but we receive gifts on our birthday and at Chinese New Year. Sometimes, if we visit someone that we don't see very often, they might get a small gift. Of course, when someone gets married, people will give them gifts.
2. What kinds of presents do Chinese people give?
I think the most popular gift is the Chinese hongbao, or red envelope. Money is put in these red envelopes and given at birthdays, weddings, and Chinese New Year. People will sometimes buy other gifts for these occasions. If it is for a child, they might give a toy or stuffed animal. Sometimes food is given as a gift, either having been cooked by the giver or store-bought.
3. On what occasions do Chinese people send gifts?
People send gifts mostly on birthdays or at Chinese New Year. These are the traditional times for gift-giving, but as many Western holidays and traditions are slowly becoming more popular in China, it is quite acceptable to give your friends a gift at Christmas or your sweetheart a gift on Valentine's Day. Even though some people may not know why different festivals are celebrated, they still enjoy the chance to show the people they care about how they feel.
4. If you were going to give a present to a child, what would you give them?
Well, if it were a boy, I would get him a Lego set. The reason why I would choose a Lego set is that it is very fun, and, at the same time, it encourages creativity. If it were a girl, I would give her a glass doll. I would give this to her because most little girls like dolls, and if it were glass, she would take better care of it and treasure it more because it could break easily.
5. Do people give the same kinds of gifts to both boys and girls?
I think some people give both boys and girls the same kinds of gifts because they don't know what to give, so they just get them the same thing. Other people may do this if two children are friends or siblings, and the person doesn't want them to fight over different toys, and if they have the same thing, they will be happy. Or, people may not know that girls and boys like different things, so they don't think about whether the gift they are getting is suitable for that child.
Importance of gifts. 6. Are expensive gifts always better than cheap gifts?
No, definitely not. A gift doesn't have to be expensive in order to show care for the person receiving it. Often, a very expensive gift can show that they were just buying something but not really thinking about what would mean the most to the receiver. This isn't always the case, but I think that a cheap gift can mean just as much or even more than an expensive gift can.
7. Do you think it is necessary for friends to give presents to each other?
No, it's not necessary. It's nice when friends give each other gifts, but there are other things you can do to show your friend your care. If someone is your friend, you shouldn't expect that they will always get you gifts. True friendship is caring about the other, not looking for how much he can give you. Topic 26. News reports. Cue card. Describe a news report that you have recently heard or read about. You should say what the story was, how you heard about this story, when you heard the news, and explain your reaction when you heard the news.
Just today I read a story online about a Beijing vice mayor getting fired for taking bribes involving construction in the lead-up to the 2008 Olympic Games. I found the story on the International Herald Tribune website. I found the story because it is one of the websites I check out every day, trying to stay informed of world events. I was happy when I heard the news. From what I've seen, China has a massive problem with corruption, and I think it's about time they started doing something about it. It seems like there is an enormous amount of money wasted every year because officials are either taking bribes or skimming off the top, and it does a major amount of damage to the Chinese people. If the government halts this trend, I think it will be a great thing for us. Money will be spent in places where it can do some good, rather than lining the pockets of people who don't need it. There have been quite a few stories of this nature lately, and it shows an extremely positive development. I'm not sure if the government is going after all the corrupted officials or just some of them, but either way, it is a step in the right direction.
Part 3. Mass Media. 1. How do most Chinese people get their news?
Most Chinese people get their news from various newspapers. Every day I see people reading newspapers on the bus, on the subway, or on the street. Also, many people get their news from the internet and TV.
2. Are most people in China more interested in local news or international news?
I think most Chinese people are more concerned with local news and domestic news, which I'd imagine is the same across the world. Unless there are huge stories going on elsewhere, local news has more of an impact on the average citizen. Also, it is easier to understand news that is about areas that you know, as opposed to some town in a country you might not even have heard of.
3. Compare newspapers and TV as sources of news.
I think if you're looking to get a general idea about the day's news, TV is a perfect way. You can get the basics from TV. If you want to get in-depth information, however, newspapers are the way to go. They can dedicate more time to each individual story, so you can learn more about different subjects.
4. How do you think the news media will change in the future?
News in the future, I think, will come from many more directions. With the creation of blogs, more people are able to report on many different things, so you'll see a lot more news and a lot more analysis. I don't think there is any way that newspapers will be able to compete with this. If people have to choose between getting more news for free online and to pay, they are going to choose online.
5. Are young and old people interested in the same news content?
I think this question partially depends on how old young people are. If they are in their 20s, I think for the most part, the news they are interested in is the same. Younger people do seem to be more interested in things like celebrities and pop culture than older people, but I think they stay pretty educated about the more important news. Older people are less concerned with the pop culture news and are more concerned with the news that matters more to the world and their country.
Children and reading. 6. Do you think it's a good idea to teach children to read before they start school?
Yes, I think it's important to try to teach children how to read at as early an age as possible. The earlier they know how to read, the sooner they can start learning other things. Also, if you teach them early, it may instill a desire in them to keep learning throughout their lives, which would be extremely valuable. I know my parents started me reading very young, and today I think I am better off because of it.
7. What kinds of things do children like to read?
I think kids all over the world like to read books that are either based in the same world they are in, school, or in a world that isn't like this one at all, fantasy, Harry Potter. Everything else, I think, fails to hold their attention. Unless it has a good, entertaining story, kids will not be interested. And I think these kinds of books kids can either identify with or can get wrapped up in.
8. Do you think the internet will influence the way people read in the future? How?
Yes, I think the internet will have an impact, though I'm not sure what that will be. I imagine that sometime someone will invent something that is the size of a book, so people can download books onto it, and it will be easier to read than a computer screen. Then from there, through the internet, it will be extremely easy for people to read any book they could possibly imagine. Also, I think the internet will give people the ability to read stuff that they are interested in. There is so much content that people will be able to find anything, so people's tastes will get highly specific. Topic 27. Public events. Cue card. Describe a local event you have attended. You should say what this event was, when and where it was, what happened in the event, and explain what you liked about this event.
Sometime during 2001, when I was living in Kunming, some friends of mine in the Beichen area invited me to a street party to promote a new housing compound that some company had just finished building. It was a very bizarre event. It was held outside in a little park near the new compound. It was a very cute little park with benches and a small playground for little children. I think the event was funded by the owners of the compound because they were giving away food. There was ice cream, soft drinks, beef, lamb, and pork meat sticks, and some other snacks of which I can't remember the names. The only problem, though, was that you had to stand in a line the length of the Great Wall. Sometimes the line would move fast, like when a bunch of the meat was cooked, but other times it just seemed to take forever. I can't remember so well, but I think that you had to be living in the Beichen area to attend the party. Oh yes, that's what it was. Our friend was living in that area, so we were able to go in for free. The party was so much fun because it was at night and we were allowed to stay out later than usual. My cousin, who lives abroad, was visiting and went with us to the party. I don't think I'll ever forget that time.
Part 3. Cultural Heritage. 1. Should businesses support local events?
I think that businesses should support local events. It not only helps to create a good image for the business, but shows customers that the business is interested in their welfare. It can also provide good advertising opportunities for the business. Everyone likes to do business with a community-minded business.
2. Should the government preserve traditional events like temple fairs?
I think the government should preserve this kind of event, and furthermore, I think that the best way they can support them is to help financially. Although, if you only let the government help to support and sponsor these kind of events, then companies like Coca-Cola, Budweiser, and McDonald's will have nothing to do. Therefore, I think it's important to let everyone help to organise and fund the events, but the government should definitely preserve and support these kinds of events.
Community life. 3. Do you think it's important to take part in local activities?
I personally don't enjoy participating in local events, but for some reason many people actually do. I'd much rather watch the event from a distance. Maybe this is just because I'm lazy, but I just don't really feel the need to go out there and be another nameless person in a crowd that won't miss me at all.
4. Do you think it's important to have a sense of local community spirit?
If a community wants to prosper, everyone must make a concerted effort to put as much into their community as possible. If you don't take care of your community, then your community can't take care of you. What I'm trying to say is that if you're in the habit of helping others in your community, then others will be more inclined to help you. It's also important that you don't litter, because if you do, then the place will look like a mess. Another thing that would help is that if parents and pet owners would clean up after their kids and pets relieve themselves, then there won't be any excrement on the grass, sidewalks and benches.
5. What are the advantages of being part of a close-knit community?
Well, one of the advantages is that your community will look out for you. If you're in trouble, you'll get support from your neighbours, and they'll be more likely to accept whatever you decide to do. Also, if you are in a close-knit community, more people will be your friend and invite you and your family over to their house for dinner. Like the saying goes, a man is only as rich as how many friends he has.
6. In what ways do neighbours cooperate and help each other in China?
This is a tough question, because I personally don't think that they do. Most of my neighbours are just nosy old busybodies who are always trying to find out some new piece of gossip. All the rest are out working all day, and when they come home, they just want to watch TV or sleep.
7. How has the sense of community changed in recent years in China?
Before, the community was very strong in China. You always did things with your neighbours and helped them in whatever way you could. Also, whenever anyone did something that wasn't quite right, everyone knew about it, and the person was very embarrassed. But now everyone is out working and, aside from a few old busybodies, no one has time to help or get involved with the affairs of their neighbours.
Topic 28. Life-changing moments. Cue card. Describe a positive change in your life. You should say when it happened, where it happened, what the change was, and explain how you have benefited from this change.
I think the most positive change that I had in my life, believe it or not, was when I decided to break up with my girlfriend. You see, going out with her started to take up most of my time, and I started neglecting my studies and my other friends. My girlfriend became almost like an obsession to me. I thought about her all the time, and when I wasn't thinking about her, I was out with her. Now don't get me wrong, she was a great girl, my girlfriend. It's just that things got way out of balance in my life. We had been going out for about 3 years. I knew her from my high school. We had gone out for a walk one evening, and I was really scared to say anything to her because I was afraid that I was going to hurt her feelings. Well, After walking for a while, I finally got up the nerve to say something to her, and once it was out in the open, it really wasn't so bad. She was thinking the same thing and said that it would be good just to slow things down for a while and see what would happen. Boy, was I relieved. We had a good laugh over things and parted as friends. Now, although I love her and really do believe that someday we might be together on a more permanent basis, it feels good to just chill out with my friends for a while.
Part 3. Life Changes. 1. What kind of events may be life-changing events?
Like I said, breaking up or ending a relationship would be one. Having an accident or hurting yourself when playing sports sure is life-changing. Winning the lottery is another life-changing event. Getting married will change your life too.
2. Do Chinese people change jobs very often? Do you think that's good?
Yes, I think that Chinese do change their jobs pretty often, and I think that it is a good thing. Until you really find a job that you feel comfortable with, then I think it is okay to change jobs. Some Chinese and people around the world have to change jobs because they get laid off or their company gets gobbled up by some big corporation and they are forced to leave.
3. How do you think employers could encourage employees not to change jobs?
Of course, they could give a lot of money, but I know that this is not always practical. I think that one thing that would really help people stay in a job is that they are shown some appreciation for what they do. I read that a lack of appreciation is one reason that people go from job to job and just can't seem to find a home. I think if employers would just listen to their employees about their need, that would be a big help too.
4. Why do so many people in China move to a different city or even go overseas to study or work?
Well, I think that people are just looking for their groove and where they belong. Now that the opportunity is there to travel, people want to take advantage of it and see where their fortunes lie. There is a big world out there, and some people want to find out if it is their cup of tea, as they say. I hate to use so many idioms, and I hope that I am using them right, but some people just have the proverbial grass is greener on the other side of the fence syndrome. They think that once they get there, all their problems will be over.
5. What do you think are the major challenges of working or studying in another country?
Well, I guess that one of the biggest ones is that you are going to a different culture and you are not sure how you are going to fit in. In most countries, one of the hardest things to deal with is prejudice. People always seem to have a little suspicion of foreigners in their country. I think that loneliness would be another thing that would be hard for someone working or studying overseas. A person would be away from family and friends, and that would be difficult.
Young people and change. 6. Are young people in China today more mature than in the past?
I don't think so. If anything, they are more immature than in the past. In the past, life was harder here in China, and young people had to grow up fast and had to take on responsibility. Now, with the country getting richer and only one child per household, they are actually pretty spoiled, and their parents do a lot of things for them.
7. What can young people learn from older people?
They can learn a lot if they want to. They can learn from the vast amount of experience that older people have. They can learn what old people did under circumstances similar to what young people go through. They can learn how to raise a family and how to have a lasting relationship. Also, they can learn how to deal with difficult situations.
8. Do you think young people can adapt to changes easier than old people?
Not necessarily. I have seen some young people that didn't know how to deal with changes at all, and then I have seen some older people who take changes without breaking a sweat. Of course, I do know, like the old saying goes about teaching an old dog new tricks, that it is sometimes harder for an older person to change, but they can do it. I think that a lot of young people here in China have a hard time with changes because they have seen such few changes and like the way things are now.
Recent changes in China. 9. Do you think China has gone through a lot of changes in recent years?
I think China has gone through some incredible changes in recent years. China is growing so quickly and at an alarming rate. Even the government is trying to slow it down so that it doesn't overheat. Economically, socially, China is really changing. Since the implementation of the open door policy, one can hardly recognize China. As the joke goes, that the crane is the national bird of China.
10. What are the most positive changes?
Well, of course, the economy is one of the most positive changes. Because of this change, China has a lot more money, so the Chinese people have a lot more money too. Joining the WTO has brought about some positive changes. People being able to go abroad easier is also a very nice change. Also, more foreigners here in China has been a good change for all.
11. Do you think there will be more changes in the future?
Oh yes, I think that China is going to keep changing. As China takes more of a role on the world stage, this is going to have a big effect on the country. Foreign influence will continue to come into the country and cause changes, like more mixed marriages and a mixture of cultures. But at the drop of a hat, we could also go back to a more closed society, and that would be a big change, but one that is possible. Topic 29. English Class Activities. Cue card. Describe an unforgettable class activity that you have taken part in as part of your English study. You should say what this activity was, when and where you did this activity, how you did it, and explain how you benefited from this activity.
The best foreign language learning activity I ever had took place in my sophomore year of college, in my English class with Mr. Wang. Every morning we would take about 20 minutes of class, and everyone had to stand up and say what they did over the weekend. The mini speeches didn't have to be long or that involved. Rather, it was just an opportunity to get everyone up and speaking English. What made the activity fun, though, was not really the assignment. Instead, it was the class that made it interesting. The first couple Mondays, the speeches weren't anything special. Most were pretty boring, and the class had more of a "let's just get this done" attitude, instead of an "I like this activity" attitude. The third Monday, however, this all changed. One of the students stood up and told an extremely creative story, using a lot of interesting phrases and some truly funny vocabulary. After this, the class all sort of accepted this as the new norm, and every week it became a contest to see who could tell the funniest, most creative story. As a result, going to class on Monday became something to really look forward to. In addition, the activity also really helped out our language ability. No longer were we just taking words and phrases out of the book, we were looking for other places, trying to be the most creative. Not only was it really fun, it also encouraged working harder.
Part 3. Learning English. 1. Why do people learn English in China?
I believe people learn English in order to adapt to the shrinking of the world. In this day and age, contact and business from country to country is extremely easy, and as a result, language has become a barrier that you must overcome if you want to participate. Therefore, learning English for most people is a great way to be able to do business or make friends with foreigners. I think it's really positive.
2. Some people say that if you are going to work in a Chinese company in China, then learning English is a waste of time. Do you agree?
I do not agree at all with this statement for several reasons. First, how do you know you are always going to be working for a Chinese company? If you can speak English well, you might be able to get a better job in an international company. Secondly, why does language learning only have to be about business? If you can speak English, you have expanded the number of friends you can possibly make. I have made friends with Chinese people only because they spoke English. I think the above statement is just an excuse given by people who don't want to try to learn new things.
3. What do you think is the best age for children to begin learning English?
I believe that children should start learning foreign languages as early as possible. If they can, they should try and learn other languages as they are learning their native language. It has been proven that kids can pick up languages easier than adults. They are less set in their ways and more open to new things. I have a cousin who has a Mexican mother, an American father, and is living in Cairo, Egypt. He is only 1 year old now, but is already picking up Spanish, English, and Arabic. Learning as a child saves a lot of hassle as an adult.
4. Would you say it's better to study English overseas than in China?
I believe that for most people this is not possible. Either it's too expensive or they can't find the time or way to live in a foreign country, so it's out of the question. However, if they can arrange it, it is definitely easier to learn a foreign language in that country. Being surrounded by people speaking the language you are trying to learn is extremely helpful. The best way to do it, I think, is to take classes of a language to build a base, then go. That way, when you get to the country, you aren't totally overwhelmed.
5. Do adults have more difficulties than children in learning a foreign language?
Yes, I believe this wholeheartedly. Adults who have been speaking one language for a long period of time may find many difficulties in learning a new language. They will also easily fall into the patterns of their native language, making learning hard. Kids, however, are still learning their native language, so they don't have established patterns to fall back on. As a result, new material is a lot easier for them to learn.
Language and cultural diversity. 6. Why do people prefer to study English over other languages?
I believe that the reason is mostly economic. English-speaking countries, for the most part, make up most of the richest countries in the world. As a result, many people want to learn English so that they can do business with companies in those rich countries. In addition, English has kind of been accepted as one of very few, if not the only, worldwide languages. People all over the world speak English. Therefore, people who want to participate in relationships that span the globe find that English is the most common language to do this.
7. English is now used as an international language. What other languages do you think might develop into international languages?
English is indeed used as an international language. The only other language I can see achieving this status is Chinese. The number of people who speak it is great, and the country is growing economically so quickly that I think more and more people worldwide are going to choose to learn it. The biggest barrier to this, however, is that Chinese is written in characters. It may be a pipe dream, but if Chinese changed to pinyin as the way to write and read, I think it would explode all over the world. I, speaking as someone trying to learn it, can testify as to how much easier that would make learning the language.
8. Besides English, what other foreign languages do people study in China?
In China, learning English reigns supreme. I imagine that it is by far the most popular language to learn in the country. No other language comes close, I think. If I had to choose some other languages for people to learn, I would guess that Japanese and Spanish would be the next two. Japanese is important because of the size of the Japanese economy. Spanish because it is so similar to English, is fairly easy to learn, and because many people worldwide speak it.
9. Compare the future popularity of Chinese and English as foreign languages to study.
English became as popular as it is now because of the extreme wealth and worldwide influence of English-speaking countries, especially the US. People realized that one of the best ways to make money was to do business with Americans, and in order to do this, they had to learn English. I think that China is approaching this position now. Its economic influence is spreading extremely fast, and people across the world are realizing that learning Chinese is a great way to make money. As a result, in the future, I think Chinese will start approaching the popularity of English, though probably not ever overtaking it.
10. Do you think studying foreign languages can benefit world peace? How?
Yes, I do believe that if countries can speak to each other easily, tensions are much easier to get rid of. Just as important, however, is studying the culture of other countries. Understanding that other countries might act differently or take offense at different actions is a great way to create a more easygoing atmosphere. But yes, language is definitely the first step towards creating a more peaceful environment.
11. What difficulties do you think international guests might have when they study Chinese?
There are many answers to this question. First, reading feels like an impossible task. Forcing yourself to memorize characters rather than being able to read and figure out the meanings of words is a huge barrier. It is extremely intimidating to see the thousands of characters and realize you have to memorize most of them. Secondly, the tones are particularly difficult. Learning a language where the inflection can indicate what kind of attitude you have, and realizing that it isn't just what you are saying, but how you are saying it that affects the meaning, is really difficult. There are also many others, like learning neutral accents and proper pronunciation. Topic 30. Advice. Cue card. Describe some advice you received from a friend or family member which was useful to you. You should say what the situation was, who gave you the advice, what the advice was, and explain how useful you think the advice was.
The best piece of advice I ever got came from my dad. It happened in my junior year of college. At that time, I was just starting to think about what I wanted to do with my life. My dad helped me a huge amount. Rather than just tell me what he thought I should do, though, he told me a story about his own life. Immediately after he got out of college, he took a job in Florida selling real estate. He ended up doing that for something like 7 years. During the entire time he was doing it, he was pretty unhappy. Sure, he had a pretty happy home life and a good family, but his job wasn't rewarding. He took it in order to make money, not to be happy. Eventually, he found something that interested him. We moved to Ohio so he could start a brewery with one of his friends from college. The job was much more interesting. He didn't come home at the end of the day relieved to be done with work. He actually enjoyed what he did. This story taught me an extremely valuable lesson. I shouldn't just jump into a job because it paid well. I should take time to find a job that I'd actually like. Money shouldn't be the number one concern. It was due to this advice that I moved here, to China.
Part 3. Advice giving. 1. Have your parents given you much advice?
Yes, my parents have given me tons of advice. They always do it in a way, though, where they aren't just telling me what to do. Instead, they give me some of their wisdom and let me do with it what I want. This way, I can make more informed decisions about important stuff.
2. What kind of advice do parents give their children?
I found that it really varies what kind of advice parents give. Many of my friends' parents are really overbearing. They try to force themselves into every decision their kids make, be it important, like moving, or unimportant, like buying a bike. Other parents are really hands-off. They let their kids make all their own decisions. This way, kids can learn from their own mistakes. I think each way has its advantages and disadvantages.
3. What kind of advice do friends give each other?
Friends seem to give each other advice about things that they have experienced before on their own. For instance, I've lived in China, so I can help my friends decide whether it'd be a smart move for them. These situations are useful because friends are often of the same age, so they can offer a viewpoint from someone who's going through the same kinds of situations. Most of the time, though, friends' advice tends to be about small things, like what clothes to wear or what stuff to buy. These situations aren't really advice, but more suggestions or what they think.
4. Do you think young people should follow their parents' advice?
No, I don't think young people should follow all of their parents' advice. I think they should listen to what their parents have to say and use that information to come up with their own decisions. Parents are there to help kids out when they need it, but not to instruct their kids how to live their lives. If you rely on your parents too much, you might eventually end up in a situation where they are not around to help you, and you have to make a decision about something you've never thought about on your own before.
5. In China, do children ever strongly oppose the advice of their parents?
I'm not too sure, but in my limited experience, it seems that Chinese people really rely on their parents. Therefore, I think that it's rare to see a Chinese person flat out denying what their parents suggest they do. It seems that they are far more likely to take what their parents say into consideration than to not listen to it.
6. In China, do young people ever give advice to older people, for example, their parents?
I think, yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with giving advice. You can make your opinions known, then whoever you are talking to can choose whether or not to listen to it. Giving advice does nothing more than try to give the person who is making a decision a little bit more information than they had before. This is especially so in the case of parents and children, because so many of parents' decisions affect kids' lives, so the kids should have a say in the decision-making process.
7. Which has more influence on young people? Advice from their parents or their friends?
This is a tough but good question. I think that when kids are really young, like under 12, they rely on their parents more than their friends. When they become teenagers, though, I think they listen to a much larger percentage of their friends' advice. Kids at this age are really concerned with being cool and being accepted, and their parents aren't that big of a help to them. Their friends know what is cool and what's not. As they get older, though, I think that people rely on their friends and family pretty equally. By this time, I think most people realize the value in everyone's opinions, so they consider what everybody says.
8. Have you ever received advice from an expert or professional other than your parents?
Yeah, I guess I have, if you consider teachers professional people. Many a time I have asked teachers for advice. For example, when I was thinking about moving to China, I asked my Asian humanities professor what he thought about the idea. He thought it would be a great move, and I took what he said into consideration. Other than teachers, though, no, I haven't really had the need to ask experts or professionals for advice. I haven't made any big enough decisions that would require anyone outside of my friends and family.
9. In China, is there anywhere where members of the public can get advice?
Yeah, there are places to go for advice. One I absolutely know of is the internet. Any time I have to make a decision, I look online for different websites that have reviews or suggestions about different things. The internet is a hugely valuable resource for things like this. Other than that, though, I can't really think of anywhere people can go for advice.